I think it's about time we had to talk about DPI, guys. What's going on, everyone? I'm John from Hobbyist PCs. Welcome to today's video. I'm going to be talking to you guys about DPI. This is something that you're going to hear about a lot if you are a PC gamer, competitive gamer, maybe you're really into first-person shooters. This is going to be a big deal. At the same time, I think it's also one of the most overhyped topics when it comes to talking about mouse sensitivity or getting your mouse set up for gaming. I decided to conduct a little bit of an experiment today, and I do have to say that I have found some things. At the same time, I don't expect them to be too groundbreaking. As a matter of fact, let's just say that this is more or less to help you understand a little better how you should probably be looking at DPI to begin with. First off, what is DPI? Well, it's short for dots per inch. But while that is sort of what it does, it indicates how many dots within an inch of movement is being read by the mouse. It's not necessarily correct. It's actually better to call it CPI, counts per inch. Basically, your mouse makes a certain number of counts as you move it across the mouse pad. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and try to explain exactly what it is that DPI and CPI does. More or less, I'm just gonna sort of demonstrate how it can affect your in-game sensitivity and how you should probably approach looking at it. But there are a couple of other great videos out there that do a much better job of explaining what it is that DPI is and how it helps you out in terms of creating a form of consistency across your games. And I'm gonna go ahead and link those into the description below. One of them being from Tech Quickie, which is sort of like a side channel of Linus Tech Tips. So if you watch Linus Tech Tips before, you'll see Linus in the video, and he explains what DPI is, at least in a quick and sort of fundamental level. And then there's another video by IOStucks Gaming, who is a professional competitive Overwatch coach, and he does an excellent job of breaking down what it is about DPI that a lot of people get wrong about it, but also why it doesn't really matter as much as people think it is. Again, like I said, I'm not gonna focus too much on clarifying exactly what it is. What I'm gonna just focus on is demonstrating how DPI affects your in-game sense. And of course, there's also one more video that I do wanna point out as well. It's a video by Gamers Nexus. It's fairly old, but in the video, Steve from Gamers Nexus talks to a Logitech representative who basically summarizes DPI as simply a base sensitivity for your mouse, and that's really how you should look at it. There are all sorts of myths that are being perpetuated on the internet, saying that, for example, you experience something called pixel skipping, where your mouse movement won't seem as smooth, it might seem skippish as you move it across the pad. Personally, I've never experienced this, and I've tried a wide range of different DPIs. But if there's one thing that I know for sure is that if your DPI is at a point where it's uncomfortable, then that's definitely not a DPI that you want to use. I can't account for people who are hypersensitive to noticing things like input lag or maybe stuttering when it comes to mouse movement. Personally, I've never experienced these sorts of issues. However, I definitely think that people overthink DPI, and I'm gonna demonstrate that to you guys shortly. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull up a few games that I play regularly and kind of show you the differences in terms of the way the sensitivity in game scales with the different settings that they offer, just so you can get an idea as to how maybe you should think about approaching setting your DPI and how you maybe might want to consider setting your DPI on a game-by-game basis. I'm not going to tell you that this is exactly what it is you should be doing, but if you're having trouble nailing your perfect sensitivity in a particular game, you might want to go back and check your DPI. Why don't we go ahead, I'm going to hop into the games, I'm going to show you guys what it is exactly happens when you change your DPI and how it scales with different game sensitivity. Okay guys, so here I am on the desktop. I'm in my Logitech gaming software. I use a G502 Proteus Spectrum, and it allows me to have the option to adjust my DPI, especially on a per game basis. Now, this is a pretty useful feature, and What I'm going to be showing you guys today will kind of explain to you, or at least I don't want to say explain to you. I'm not here to tell you how to set this thing up. This is more or less just a demonstration to show you guys how DPI can affect the way your mouse feels in specific games. And a lot of this really boils down to how much flexibility a game offers in terms of adjusting your sensitivity. Now, I'm going to start off here at 800 DPI. That's my normal preferred DPI across most games. And I'm going to start off with Battlefield 5. Okay, so I'm here in the practice range in Battlefield 5, and generally what you hear from a lot of pros or people who are giving aiming advice, you want to set your sensitivity so that your character does a full 360 from one side of your mouse pad to the other. This is meant for consistency reasons across games. That's the whole point of it. When it comes to like getting your aim sensitivity down, the most important thing that a lot of pros tend to stress is consistency. So this means your sensitivity is the same across all games. There's no variation in it whatsoever. And it all boils down to building muscle memory. Now, there's a couple of things that I've noticed that I just simply want to point out, but I'm not going to preach this as gospel by any means. First off, I'm going to start with FOV, and this is something that I tried out before I started recording this. Now, right now, my FOV is set horizontally at 90. This game, it'll say 74 on the slider. If you look on the right-hand side, it says FOV 90, horizontal FOV. So that's just the FOV I use across pretty much every game that gives me the option to adjust my FOV. I personally just prefer it. If you don't know what an FOV does, what it does is it increases your field of view or decreases it. As I decrease my field of view as low as I can go, you can see that you don't see as much in the peripherals, but things that are placed right in front of you are significantly bigger. Now, if you go the opposite direction, you get a bit of a different effect. Now, you're going to see that anything that's directly in front of me is going to look smaller, but my peripherals are going to be a lot wider. So I'm going to be able to see more. It's basically like you're seeing a wider angle, but the trade-off there is that you get this sort of fisheye lens effect, and it might end up making targets at a distance look smaller than they are. Now, I want to show you something. A lot of people, say that FOV has a direct influence on your sensitivity. Now, I'm not denying it, but if I were to just base everything off of the 360 rule, and I just want to first point out that I don't use a 360 to measure my sensitivity. What I use is it's more like 90 degrees past 360. That's just what feels right to me. I find that like going to a 360 on the size of mouse pad that I use is a bit too too slow. It's too low, and I have to use massive arm movements just to play in close quarters combat. And since I prefer to play in close quarters combat, I raise my sensitivity a little bit. Now, it's just preferential. By no means should you guys take this advice as something that you should be doing. So remember, again, your sensitivity, your DPI, all this stuff is preferential based on your play style and the size of your mouse pad. I would say the size of your mouse pad is probably one of the bigger determining factors. Now, the way that they do this is that they'll tell you to pick a corner, something sharp like this. This is, a narrow pixel reference point. You want to go from one side of your mouse pad to the other. Now, this is at my normal FOV. I'm going to go ahead and just go from one side, and to kind of guarantee some consistency or try to guarantee some consistency here, I have my keyboard placed in a specific spot on my massive mouse mat. My keyboard can go on top of it. It's so big. And I put a kettlebell on the other side of my mouse pad to kind of indicate where I should stop. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and try to line this up as good as I can. Takes a second. There we go. And I'm going to just move across, go in a straight line as possible to the best of my ability until I stop. And this is about where I like to have it. That's generally where I like to have my sensitivity most of the time. And if I go back, I technically should land pretty close, but it's not all the way there. But it's around where I like to have it. Every game's going to have basically like a minimum adjustment point. In this case, they use percentage to kind of base your sensitivity off of. And as you see, if I move it one notch, I'm going to move it up one. We want to make note of the amount of degrees of a difference that the mouse changes. Your sensitivity will scale with your DPI with every game a different way. Every game offers different flexibility. in terms of how much the sensitivity moves and how much you can move it at, and it's all based on like a scale, essentially. So I'm going to go ahead and just do the same thing, move it over, and we're going to see where it ends up. Now that's pretty big. I mean, compared to over here, that's where I was before. I went this far. I'm going to bump it back down, and what I want to try to do is I want to go to my DPI, to my Logitech software, and I'm going to go ahead and bump it down to 400. This is a lower DPI. This is what a lot of the pros like to use. Okay, now I've just adjusted my DPI to 400, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and just find that spot right there on the pillar, and I set it to about 15%. I'll show you guys in the menu real quick. Now, I should mention something here. It's requiring more movement of the mouse, especially with my arm, to have to navigate the menu. So for some of you, this might be a determining factor as far as how you prefer your DPI. Your menu cursor won't be affected by your in-game sensitivity. So the in-game sensitivity largely only has to do with your aiming when you're controlling your characters. So if you don't like having to move your mouse so much when you're in the game to navigate menus, then you might want to consider adjusting your DPI to compensate for that. However, just keep in mind, based on the way that DPI scales with sensitivity, you might not be able to nail your perfect sensitivity because of it. And I'm going to demonstrate this to you in a minute. Now, under controls, you can see I have it set to 15%, where I had it set to 6% prior to that at 800 DPI. That's not even double. So I've essentially reduced my DPI by half, and I've had to almost it's more than doubled. It's definitely more than doubled. Theoretically I would have had to set it to 12, right? If I was to go double, but it's not the case here, and I'm going to show you that in a second. So I'm going to go ahead and go for that, that normal 360 range that I go for, and I've just stopped short. Normally I was sitting right around here, but I've stopped short. Now let's go ahead and readjust my sensitivity once. I'm going to bump it up one notch, 16. I'm going to do the same test. We're going to make note of how much the degrees changed, because you want to pay attention to the degrees. You don't want to pay attention to pixels. You don't want to pay attention to just the 360 itself. You want to pay attention to how many degrees of a difference you see when you adjust your sensitivity. So because that all boils down to consistency. Every game might end up giving you a different result. So we're going to go ahead and just do the test here. I'm going to go for that 360, bump it over, and I've moved past my target. So just one notch, as you had seen, the difference is smaller, whereas before it was around here, and this time I'm around here, you can see that degree difference is smaller than it was at 800 DPI. At 800 DPI, I was able to nail it right around here. As I moved it up one notch, I was all the way over here. So that's a bigger degree difference when it comes to the difference between my DPI and my sensitivity. So this is what I'm trying to point out. When you're considering your DPI, you want to have some consistency across games, but you might actually have to adjust your DPI on a game-per-game basis. Now, this kind of goes against what a lot of pros say, but if they're talking about having a consistent 360 on your mouse pad based on your distance, then you might have to consider adjusting your DPI per game. Now, as I've mentioned earlier, DPI at the end of the day is just a base sensitivity. It's not even so much dots per inch as it's counts per inch. It's how much the mouse sensor counts per movement within an inch, and it's just a metric that they use to measure the base sensitivity of the mouse. These theories of pixel skipping and all that stuff are just a myth, to be honest with you. Like, it's more or less it's angle skipping that you're concerned about. Regardless of the DPI that I use, and I've tried a bunch of different DPIs in game. I've used 400, 800, 1200. The mouse, to me, I didn't notice any sort of perceptible smoothness difference or anything like that. I didn't notice any sort of skipping or anything like that. It's a lot more pronounced at higher sensitivities, higher in-game sensitivities, than it is at lower in-game sensitivity. So if you play at a high sensitivity, this might be more important information for you than it is for someone who plays at a low sensitivity, like I do. Excuse me. But I'm going to go ahead and just kind of carry this across to a different game, and I'm going to kind of show you how the game you play can affect the DPI you should possibly be considering. Okay, now here we are. We're playing Apex Legends. I'm in the training area, and right now I'm using this specific reference point for a reason. It's because right now I've got a good reference that they're 90 degrees apart from each other. They're directly adjacent, and I can use that as a good way to kind of gauge my compass, I guess, in terms of making sure that I'm going in specific degrees. I could always look at the compass up above me if I really need to. However, in this case, there's like a nice sharp point right here in the corner, and I'm gonna just kind of do my quote-unquote 360 real quick to kind of show you, you know, just how this works for me. And as you can see, I'm at my kind of magic 90 degrees past 360 point. That's about where I should have my sensitivity in game if I want to talk about parity between games. I'm at 800 DPI. And this game has different sensitivity options. Now, I'm set at 1.6. I've been thinking about setting this to 1. So I'm gonna play around with that, but that's besides the point. I've got mouse acceleration off. I'm not using mouse invert. Mouse acceleration is a different discussion for another day. I would recommend that if you play shooter games that you have this off for the sake of consistency. Now, like I said, 800 DPI. I'm gonna bump my sensitivity down 1. We're gonna bump it to 1.5. Set it right over here. I'm gonna go do my quote-unquote 360, and you can see that in terms of a degree difference, you know, it's not too bad, but it's still kind of low. Like, realistically, if I wanted to make a small adjustment, I would have to readjust my DPI so that I can get somewhere between where I had it, which is around over here, and maybe somewhere over here. I would have to readjust my DPI to make that scaling fit better. Now I'm going to go ahead and set it to 400. So we're going to go back to 1.6 where I had it. Now I have my DPI set to 400. I'm going to go ahead and see where we're at first, and we'll try to get my sensitivity to be about where I had it at 800 DPI. You see, that's pretty low. Pretty big, pretty stark difference, actually. We'll see what happens when we bump it up to like 2.3. Let's try that. See what it does. Still not enough. Let's continue moving it. Let's try 2.7. Okay, almost there. Let's keep going. Let's try 2.9. Still not enough, but you can see that the difference with each adjustment is smaller. Pretty significantly smaller, actually. So maybe if we go up to 3.2, maybe this will be about where my sensitivity would normally be, or how I'd like to have it. That's pretty much right there. So as we move to 3.2 is about where my sensitivity would be if I was at 800 DPI. Now let's go ahead and bump it down 1, and let's see how much of a difference it makes. So we're right here. I'm gonna go ahead, back up over to this side. And it's really not that different. You can see that, like, when we had it at 800, it was much wider. I think it was right around here when I made an adjustment down. And that's not bad. So I'm gonna go ahead and set my DPI back to 800. Keep this in mind. I'm gonna show you one more game just to kind of give you guys an idea as to why you might want to consider your DPI on a per game basis. And it's gonna be made pretty apparent when you see this. Okay, so this is Destiny 2, guys. I readjusted my DPI to 800. I used to play this game at 1200. Recently, I've made the switch to 800 just because I liked the way that 800 scaled it with sensitivities in a lot of the games. But I might end up running into an issue with this game as far as sensitivity is concerned, because I'm going to show you right now. Open the settings and we go to controls. If we look at the sensitivity, it's just numbers. And they only go up to, you know, they go up pretty high, but I'm going to show you in a minute, like, the lack of granularity as far as the sensitivity is concerned. I had it set to 4 before, and if if lowering the DPI suggests anything, then I should have it about set to 7, I'm gonna guess. So we're gonna take a look and see where we're at here. Let's get a baseline. I haven't had a chance to play around with this yet, so let's see where we can go. I got a nice spot right here on the wall. All right, this is already way too high, way past. I'm past the full 180, so we're gonna drop it down a little bit. Let's go 5, and we're gonna see how that works out. Let's get that right here. And okay, so you can see that we're not quite at that 90-degree point past past the 360 that I like to have it. So in theory, I should be able to just bump it up 1 and get there. But as you can see in just a second here, it's kind of past it. So in this case, I might need to consider maybe dropping my DPI. And I'm going to try that. So you can see that we can't quite get the sensitivity right to where I should have it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop my DPI down to 400. All right, with the DPI set to 400, I haven't adjusted the sensitivity yet. You can see that goes about that far. So if we bump this up in theory, let's go 9. Let's try that. See how that feels. And not quite there, so we can bump it up some more. Let's go 1. We're at 10 now. Almost. So I'm gonna guess that if we bump it up just 1 more notch, that's about right there. So you could see that at 400, I was able to hone in on my exact sensitivity. Whereas on every other game that I was playing, Apex Legends and Battlefield 5, I had no problem at 800 DPI nailing my sensitivity. And this is kind of just the thing I wanted to highlight here is you might need to possibly adjust your DPI based on the game you're playing. And this is because you might not end up having the same consistency across games. And that's what you want. If you want your aim to be consistent in every game that you play, you want to make sure that you have that metric set, you know? You want to make sure that you can basically just muscle memory your way onto your targets. You don't want it to be an issue. I'm not the greatest aimer on the planet, but you can kind of see that this feels right to me. I might be overshooting my targets a little bit, but this is how I normally keep my sensitivity in most games. Whereas, like, where at 800, I had to compensate. I had to slightly lower my sensitivity just to kind of get it close to where I normally would have it. But this is normally where I would keep my sensitivity in most games. And this is just based on the size of my mouse pad, along with the way I like my mouse to feel. As far as, like, DPI is concerned, this doesn't feel any different. This feels no different than how I would have it in Battlefield, how I would have it in Apex Legends. It feels consistent based on how I would have it across games. So I'm not here to try to disprove anything or to tell you guys that you should have your DPI set a certain way. No, what I'm simply doing here is demonstrating to you guys what you should be using DPI for. It's meant to help you with consistency, and when a game has good sensitivity options, you should be able to just keep your DPI the same across all games. But there might be cases from time to time where you have to adjust your DPI because the game doesn't give you the flexibility you need to get that sensitivity honed into where you normally have it. And of course, like, when I talk about, you can see, like, my cursor feels super slow. And having my field of view set the same as I do in every other game feels the same to me. When I make certain movements, it goes exactly where I expect it to. You know? I don't overshoot. But that's really about it. Like, I just wanted to show that to you guys. And those guys are my findings that I have been noticing with DPI recently. And I just wanted to share this with you guys because there are too many people that I see overthinking DPI entirely. I guess a good example would be from my own personal experience where I've been having a lot of trouble hitting my targets in Apex Legends, and the first thing people ask me is, what's your DPI set to? And then I just kind of roll my eyes and shake my head and just tell them, like, dude, it's not my DPI. I could easily tell you that my problem in Apex Legends right now is just the fact that I'm not used to tracking fast moving targets. That's really all it is. So it's just kind of funny to me to see that people jump to DPI right off the bat, because as you saw in this video, you can pretty much match up your in-game sensitivity across all games with different DPIs if you wanted to. But it's just getting a little crazy at some point to see that some of these myths just continue to get perpetuated. And I just wanted to try to clarify how you maybe might want to approach looking at your DPI on your mouse. So I hope this video was helpful for you guys. I appreciate you guys watching it, and if it was helpful, please be sure to like, share, and comment down below. Maybe if you guys wanna spark a DPI discussion, or perhaps you have some insights that maybe I'm not aware of, I'd be more than glad to have a discussion with you in the chat about that. Or if you want to carry the discussion over to the Discord, there's a link to my Discord down below for the Hobbyist PCs Discord, and it's a great place to go and participate in these sorts of discussions. I'm by no means like a professional gamer, guys. Like, I'm very much a casual at best. So if you want to discredit me because I'm just a casual gamer, that's totally fine. But that wasn't my intention with this video. I'm not here to go around dispelling myths or anything like that. It's just to demonstrate one way that a person could look at DPI and how they should probably approach it and not overthink it. And also, guys, there are more links in the description down below for my various social media pages, especially on Twitter. I'm very active on there. I'd love to get into some discussions with you guys there as well. And of course, I stream twice a week on Twitch, Tuesdays and Wednesdays, from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's a great place to come in and just have tech discussions. You can ask me for PC building advice, or we can just have fun and play games, because I love playing games with you guys. Like, this, one of my favorite things about streaming is getting to know you guys and getting to play games with you. So if you guys want to jump in, you're always welcome to. I appreciate you guys hanging out and watching the video. Have a good one, everyone.